Hello, agentpreneurs, and welcome to the Daily List Report. I'm your host, Randy Shiozaki. I'm one of the co-founders of ListReports, and today we've got a really exciting show. I know I always say that, but I'm really excited for today's conversation. We've got Katie Lance on. Katie Lance is with Katie Lance Consulting. That's her business. What's really interesting about her background is that she's been in marketing and branding for more than 20 years. She's formerly the chief strategist and social media director for Inman News, so I'm sure a lot of you out there, like myself, are daily readers of Inman. She's actually the co-founder of Inman Next, which is really the industry's leading real estate blog. Prior to that, she was the former managing editor for Forum, that is the future of real estate marketing. And so she's got a tremendous amount of experience in and around social media and marketing, and in particular in the domain of real estate, which is directly relevant to all of you. All right, so here's a couple of sites for you to check out with Katie. She's, no surprise, she's got lots and lots of links. I pulled up a few of them here. She's all over the internet, which is a good thing for somebody who's into social media and marketing. The first one here is katielance.com. So you can check out her background, her information. If you want to work with Katie, you can get that information there. I've also got up here her Instagram. So it is at Katie Lance. So definitely consider following her on Instagram. She's got a really nice following and a bunch of really great content there. And last but not least, of course, we are YouTubers here, and so she can be another YouTube buddy. So you check her out on YouTube, Katie Lance on YouTube. Again, all of these links are below, so just click on them. Definitely subscribe. She's got a lot of amazing content right there on YouTube as well. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Katie on right now. Katie, welcome to the Daily List Report.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
I'm excited to have you on, and I'm excited to talk to you. You've got an incredible background and a lot of experience, and I'm sure you have tons of great stuff to share with our agents. But as I always do, to get started off here, why don't you take a moment and just introduce yourself, tell our agentpreneurs out there a little bit about who Katie is.
Absolutely. So I have been in the, like you said, been in the marketing and branding space for quite some time, and got my start in real estate. I think it's probably coming up close to like 15 years or so, which is crazy.
Wow.
I started working in a local real estate office here in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I was their marketing director and had always done, a lot of marketing experience, but had really never been exposed to real estate. And so I was the gal who, got to put together the Sunday newspaper ads, and I did all the just listed, just sold postcards and all of that. And that was, I think, a really great foundation for just sort of the beginning of my career in marketing with real estate. From there, I went on to work for Inman News, as you mentioned. And then in 2012, got the entrepreneurial bug and decided to venture out on my own. So we've been running our company for about 8 years now. My husband and I are, like I mentioned before we went on the air, partners in life, partners in business.
Yeah,
and we thank you. And we really have a heart for the real estate industry. Our specialty is in really helping agents and brokers get smarter about social media. Social media changes all the time. And we really feel like, as an agent or broker, you don't need to be spending all day on social media. You don't need to be tweeting all day long or, Facebooking all day long, but you have to have a smart strategy. So that's really what we focus on. And it's exciting to be able to serve, the industry. And especially now with everything going on in the world, it's great to be able to have this technology to be able to serve people anywhere, right? Anywhere in the world virtually.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more, right? What's interesting, Katie, about social is that it's one of these things where I've interviewed a lot of agents who are excellent at it, right? And they have tons of followers. And one of the things that they say to me consistently for a top social media person or personality in real estate is they say oftentimes to me that they don't even have to do listing presentations anymore, right? Because the person who's contacted them, let's say for a listing presentation, already feels like they know who they are. They've already made up their mind, right? People are doing their homework. And so it's really interesting the power that it can have. And then you've got sort of the other side, or people who are chipping away, right? They're doing a couple posts here and there. They haven't really built up that following. They haven't seen maybe a practical return from it. And so it's interesting to me. So I'm curious from your perspective, Katie, as you're advising agents who aren't at the top of the food chain, right? They're sort of earlier on in their journey. Where do they start? What are the best practices? Like, how do they kind of get moving in the right direction?
Yeah, it's definitely a question I get asked often. And I think there's a few different pieces of it. I think the first thing is to figure out, where do you want to be on social media? Is there a certain platform you enjoy being on right now, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn, or, that's kind of first and foremost, is sort of trying out each one and sort of figuring out which one you enjoy being on. And then second of all, I would also say, where are your clients hanging out? And if you're not sure, it's always a great idea to reach out, send an email, send an email to your database and say, hey, we're working on leveling up our social media strategy, and we'd love to know, where are you hanging out? Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, none of the above. That's okay too. And just kind of getting a barometer for, I think, where people are. And then from there, I would really think about two main things. The first being that real estate's a relationship business, right? We all know this. Social media does not replace that. But there's a piece of social media that involves not just talking about yourself, but involves showing up and recognizing other people and being intentional and wishing people happy birthday and commenting on pictures of their kids or the great glass of wine they had last night. That relationship building piece of it is important. And the second piece of it is the content piece of it, which I'm sure we'll get into. Like you said a second ago, there's a lot of agents who are showing up who, don't really need to sell themselves, because they show up at the door and those folks, they feel like they know you, right? They're like, oh, I see you everywhere. And it's because of that content that you're putting out. So there's a few different pieces of it, but those are a few places I would say, especially if you're at the beginning stages.
No, that makes sense. And Katie, you said something really interesting that no one else has said to me before. But it's something that's near and dear to my heart, because it's something that I, as the head of product at ListReports, right, do all the time, which is we survey our users, right? We ask them questions. And no one has actually suggested that as you're sort of embarking on a social media journey, or really any journey with your customers, that sending out a little bit of some kind of a survey that's an interesting thing. No one's ever mentioned that, but it makes a lot of sense, right? We do it internally because we want to understand sort of where our customers are, what their needs are, what they like, what they don't like, things like that. And I guess the same thing applies here, but I've never heard an agent say, let me survey my customer base or my database. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I just think it's a really provocative and an interesting notion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, a lot of times we just assume what we think people want to know, or we assume what we should be posting out there. And, or we assume, oh gosh, everyone's on Facebook, or we assume no one's on Facebook, right? We sort of make these assumptions. And so I think sometimes we overthink it too. We think, oh my gosh, do I need to create a survey? Like, I'm not that technical. And honestly, it could be as simple as sending an email to your database. If you've got a CRM or some sort of email marketing platform, just send a quick email, and say, hey, we're just reaching out. We're just kind of doing an informal survey. And we'd love to see where you're spending the most time. And honestly, you could probably also take that verbiage that you put in an email, and also that could be a post on Facebook. It could be a post on Instagram or any platform you happen to be on, and just, kind of get a barometer of where people are. And I think it does two things. I think it shows that you're curious, that you are looking to improve. And I also think it shows that you are, being intentional about your social media strategy. And then once you've done that, I think you can also do a kind of an informal survey in terms of what people want to hear from you. What are they most interested in? Are they interested in, real estate tips and tools? Are they curious about how you're keeping people safe right now during COVID? Are they wondering if they should even think about buying or selling right now? Are they wanting the best, information around remodeling? Like, there's so much content and information that you could share. It's also, I think the next level would be, okay, great. Here are some things that we're thinking about. Which ones are most relevant to you, or that you would be of interest in, or is there something I haven't mentioned, right? And so we're, for us, we're constantly doing that. At least a few times a year, I'm, putting out feelers on email and social media, saying, what are the questions you have? What are things that you want to that you are curious about? Mm-hmm. And like I said, I think it goes back to we just assume. Assume. We think we know, but it's good. And then by the way, once people have answered, well, now you've got that content in their voice too, in how they respond to you. And, and that verbiage of how they respond to you, that could be used in marketing copy and email copy. And it's kind of an advanced tip, but
it makes sense.
Sort of a win-win.
It makes sense. And it's, the survey data, right, at least as I use it, right, is one input, right? So there's the data that you get from surveying your users. the data that I read every day in Inman, for example, or that NAR puts out, or whatever, right? That's also a set of data and input, right? So for all of you out there, you can look at statistics, right? If you understand the demographic or the basic demographic of your audience, right, or the people that you want to do business with, right? There's a lot of data that's already available that can help inform that. But you said something else, Katie, that I think is really important, which is you said something to this effect, correct me if I'm wrong, right? That you should pick the platforms that sort of work for you or resonate with you. So here's I guess an extreme example, right? If it turns out that the customers that you want to attract are on a platform that doesn't feel natural to you, that you're not comfortable with, then there's a misalignment there. And I think that warrants a reevaluation. This show, for example, Katie, I started this on Facebook. This was a Facebook live show every single day. And I switched it to YouTube probably 2 months in, because what I realized is that YouTube is a better engagement platform than Facebook. We got a lot more views on Facebook, but they were short. They were tiny little micro views. And on YouTube, we're getting 8, 10, 12, 15 minutes of engagement, average engagement per show. And I wanted to build an engagement platform. So I'm fine having less viewers, but more quality viewers than more viewers, because I don't chase vanity metrics. And that's just my own personal preference, right? That's how I operate this show. So I don't know if there's anything to elaborate on there, but I like this idea that you should pick the platform that resonates with you. And I don't know, Katie, in your experience, if there are certain platforms that are better for certain things in the same way that we've discovered that for ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, part of it goes down to your content, of course. And, I really believe that regardless of platforms, as much as I love social media and our business is based on social media is rented ground. We don't own it. And so I really believe that regardless of platform, I think it's really important for agents and brokers to develop content and also develop their email list, but really develop assets that will go with them wherever they go. So now you're, instead of kind of thinking about what content is best for each platform, and there's certainly different types of content that I think are better for different platforms, as you mentioned. I think it's almost like taking a step back and going, well, what type of content could we create that's timeless, that's evergreen, that's relevant today, but it's also relevant maybe 3-6 months down the road, and it works on YouTube. It could also work on Facebook. Maybe it could be an IGTV. Maybe it could get turned into a blog post and repurposed over on LinkedIn, and that's where I think you can kind of get the secret sauce, so to speak, is kind of taking a step back and thinking about content, right, and building those assets that again go with you wherever you go. Content, email list, things like that.
No, I think that makes sense, Katie, right? So for this show, for example, we post it on LinkedIn, we post it on Facebook, right? And so we get that sort of ancillary benefit. We've created one piece of content and we can use it in multiple places. But I think what you're saying is very true, which is when you figure out your content strategy, you have to understand limitations may not be the right word, but I'll use limitations, the limitations of that. And I'll give you, so with this show, Katie, right, most of my conversations are very topical, like they're very timely, right? George Wright, who's a senior economist at Realtor.com, is a regular on this show. And that information, counter to the evergreen, is not evergreen, right? That information comes on every single month. And so what you need to understand, for those of you watching right now, is that does put a limit on your views, right? Versus content, Katie, as you said, which is evergreen, where you might have that explosion, a year from now on some video that you had completely forgotten about, right? Gia Goodrich, who's been on the show a couple times, she's a photographer. This show actually exploded her platform because the right people saw it. It took her 2 years, Katie, to get to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. And after this show, she's now sitting at 14,000 subscribers. Because the right people saw it, the algorithm picked her up, like all of this confluence of events, right? But that was a video that she had out for a while. She had no idea. And so I think it's important, as you think about your content strategy, to make sure that you understand sort of the limits. And I think, Katie, generally speaking, you're correct. That is evergreen content. People love looking at homes online, right? If that home is not on the market, it doesn't really matter. People like looking at pretty houses, right? That, in a sense, is a form of evergreen content.
And I think there's a balance, to your point, of timely content, right? Things that are really relevant right now, but also having things that are timeless or evergreen. And so, I think as someone progresses from more beginner to like intermediate and advanced with a lot of this, I think that a lot of times we see that sort of natural trajectory where maybe every week they're doing something that's really timely and in the moment and keeps them really relevant right now, but also thinking about some long-term stuff. And I think when you think long-term, now you're building a library of content. And like you said, people will happen upon videos that are, 6 months old, a year old, or whatever it might be. And especially for things that are, somewhat evergreen or timeless. And again, I think builds to that credibility. And also it's something that as you kind of start to go down this road of social media, also you start to think about how can you repurpose content, right? Yes. So you might, for example, a lot of our podcasts, we record live on Facebook because Facebook Live is one of the best ways to get engagement on Facebook. But then we'll repurpose that, right? We'll download that. We'll turn that into a podcast. We'll get that edited. We'll, maybe turn that into a couple micro pieces of content on Instagram. We'll get it transcribed and have it turned into a blog post. And, it's again, the kind of this idea of like, not spray and pray, but thinking of how can you sort of slice and dice and repurpose things in a smart way.
Well, I think what that speaks to, though, when you said, obviously not a spray and pray, but when someone's starting out, Katie, on social media and they're trying different kinds of content, a reevaluation of your content strategy is obviously critical, right? Because you need to look at what is and what isn't working. So can you touch on that for a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually, ironically, just did a YouTube video about this recently.
Oh, nice.
About that was not planned, but that was a good segue.
Yeah.
We actually just talked about this recently.
Is this the social media audit?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, we'll link to that one below as well. So social media, it says audit yourself, social media for realtors during uncertain times. So yes.
Yes. And it's this idea of before you can move forward, sometimes it's important to take a step back. And, we do this at the end of every year. I always take a step back, usually around this time of year, around October or so. We'll kind of take a step back and go, what's working, what's not working. We'll look at our analytics for Facebook, for YouTube, for Google, for Instagram. And it's really fascinating to kind of see, what type of content got the most reach, got the most clicks, got the most engagement. As you mentioned, engagement's the name of the game. It's not just about a number of views, but how many people are interacting with it, how many people shared it, right? How many people saved it if you're looking at Instagram analytics. And so kind of looking at some of those different data points and seeing, well, are there some commonalities? Are there some things that work better on one platform or another? But also in terms of kind of auditing yourself, the word audit's a little scary, but auditing yourself, meaning look at all of your social media platforms, or at least kind of the top 5 or 10, Google yourself if need be, and see what comes up. It's not just social media, as you know, it's different websites you've created over the years. It's Yelp, it's Realtor.com, it's Zillow, it's all these different places, like these digital breadcrumbs we've left. And a lot of times when I do this with our corporate clients, we'll see links that are broken, outdated information on their bio. I can't find their email, right? So it's helpful to kind of take a step back to see, what needs a little bit of freshening up. And also sometimes that's an opportunity to say, gosh, we have a Twitter account, but nothing's happening there. Or we just have like this automatic feed, which kind of tells me the lights are on, but nobody's home. Yeah. So maybe it's time to deactivate it, right? And take it down, at least for right now. We could always reactivate it later on. But, again, it's a kind of good time to kind of take that step back, sort of do that self-analysis.
Katie, that's interesting. That reminds me of something, and I'm curious to know if you think this was a good idea or a bad idea. But we tried Twitter for a while. This was years ago, right? And it just wasn't a good platform for us. And so we decided not to deactivate our account. But what we did was we put our last post, right? The first post that you see basically says, find us elsewhere, right? Find us on YouTube, find us on, Instagram, find us on Facebook, whatever.
I think that's great.
But I think that this point can't be stated strongly enough, right? Which is that consumers are going to look for you, they're going to Google you, and they're going to look at these things. And if they see dead accounts, to your point, if they see broken links, and I can't tell you how many agents I've spoken to where I go to their website and it has a security issue, or it's down, or there's no way to contact them, right? Ridiculous things. Like you really have to take yourself out, or better yet, work with a professional, right, to help you look at these things through best practices and fresh eyes and say, look, we need to clean these things up, because you never know. That's that one point where consumers are so fickle, right, Katie, that they find you and they click on something and they're like, and they're in the right mindset and they reach for the contact button and it doesn't work. And they don't go figure out how to get to you. They just move on, right? And so it's important that all of these things work perfectly every time.
Absolutely. And we never know about those instances, right? We never know how many times that happens. And so it is good just to periodically, and if anything, one tip I would say to anybody watching is, like I said, Google yourself, go into Google, either log out of Google or, I know you can go incognito in Google, put your name in quotes, especially if you have a common name. So if I'm going to Google myself, it'd be Katie Lance, and just see, open up those top 5 or 10 things and see what comes out. And definitely check for broken links, because I can't tell you how often
all the time,
I'll go to an
doesn't
agent
it?
or broker's
Yes.
site, and if I'm clicking around, it's like, broken, broken, broken. Check your email signature. When's the last time you checked your email signature to see if like any of those links are broken, right? Like just these things that we don't even think about. It's a good time to kind of take a step back and check some. It's like the low hanging fruit.
I agree. I think that makes sense. So I want to touch back on one topic, Katie. We talked about balance, right? And you use balance in the context of, let's say, evergreen content, very topical, timely content. But there's another sort of facet of balance that I know a lot of agents have asked me about, and I'm curious to get your perspective on, which is the balance of their professional life versus their personal life on social media. I have my own perspective on this, but I'm curious to hear your perspective.
So a lot of agents will tell me something like, Katie, I've got my personal life over here and I've got my business life over here, and I like it that way. I want to
Yeah.
keep it separate. And as much as I understand that, real estate is a personal business, right? It's not always black or white. And it doesn't mean you have to share every moment of your life. It doesn't mean you have to share every, what you had for breakfast. But for most people, buying and selling a home is one of the biggest moments of their life, right? It's right up there with getting married or having kids. It's a very emotional, personal decision. So it's one of the reasons why it's very different than just about any other industry that's out there. And so I do think that there is a balance. One of the ways I think about it is your personal profile is a great place to connect with some of your clients. Not everybody. You're not going to maybe you may not want to be friends with everybody, and that's fine. But I do think your personal profile is a great place to connect on a personal level. And your personal profile isn't the place to spam all your friends and to spam about listings. It's really the place to connect with other people. It's to, as I said earlier, wish people a happy birthday. Or, instead of being the 20th person on their page to say happy birthday, be the one person that calls them that day, right? Because you
Yeah.
saw it on Facebook.
Yeah.
It's a place to build relationships. I often talk about this idea of focus 5, where every day go on your personal profile, pick 5 people that you're going to intentionally connect with, not just like 5 things, but take a few minutes to really engage and connect with people. It's a tiny, small thing that makes a big difference. The business part of it is where obviously you're talking about your listings, you're talking about your open houses, but it's more than that too, right? Especially if you've got a business page for Instagram or a business page for Facebook. It's not just about listings, although it can be. It's where content comes into play, right? Where you're maybe doing those Monday market updates that are really timely, or you're putting out some of that evergreen content. That original content is the content that's going to attract people, attract clients versus chasing leads. And so I think there's a balance between the both. And I would also say on your business page, in terms of listings, I think sometimes listings get a bad rap. People will say, oh, don't promote listings. I disagree. A big part of your business is promoting listings. But what you shouldn't do is you shouldn't just send out the link to the MLS. Don't send out a really bad link. If you're going to share something, right, share something that you own. Share a link back to your site where you wrote a blog about that listing.
Right.
Share a link to your YouTube, or upload a video about, that you did about that listing. Like, the content you put out there, I think, is really, really important. So I think it's a balance, again, between the both. And sometimes you might take a post from your business page periodically and share that to your personal profile. Every once in a while, we do that also. So I do think there's a little bit of a bridge between the both, but it goes back to what I said in the beginning. It's not just content. It's the reason why you can't just hire someone to just like do it all for you, right?
Yeah.
Like, we see this right now with the pandemic. The agents and brokers that are killing it right now with social media are the ones who are showing up. They're there. They're like, you can't fake that. You can't just check off the box and say, yeah, I did my social media. Someone else is doing it for me. Like, there's a piece of it you got to show up, right? So
I
not to
think
go down
that's
too much
really
of a
important.
rabbit hole, but
No. I think that's really important. I think those are really good points, Katie. I would say that in my experience, in having spoken to a lot of agents who I think are doing very well on social and getting a lot of business from it, is that Instagram has become that sort of right blend of a social platform for this, right? Whereas Facebook, and part of this is just legacy, right? We started on Facebook a decade ago or more, right? And you had your personal page and you set up a business page, and it's just a lot to do. Instagram is more of a hybrid if you have a public account. And what I've seen, and this is, Brian Casella, who does really well on social media, who's been on the show a few times. Gogo, she's a great agent in Michigan. Loida Velasquez, that are really active and do well on social media, is they have this really great, I think, authenticity that comes through, which transcends your job. It's not just about your work, right? To your point, you're a real person as well. And Gogo talks about, I don't know, writing up an offer at 1 a.m. and then making lunch for her kids for the next morning, right? And Brian's, at the gym training for UFC or playing basketball or driving his nice cars or what. But this is also just very authentic to who he is, right? And so there's a level of authenticity I think is important. And I think that people who consume this content crave a level of authenticity. And I think that's important because that becomes your brand. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree. I feel like the word authenticity has become a little bit of a buzzword. And people mistake authenticity with thinking that they have to share literally every moment of their life. And I've seen a lot of things like inappropriately shared. I'm like, no, we don't need to share that. I mean, especially with everything going on in the world, right? There's a lot of really personal things that are happening that maybe we don't need to share everything, right? But what authenticity means to me is thinking about, is there an opportunity to, take people a little bit behind the scenes and who you are and what are you all about and what do you stand for? And, part of that also means that you may not be everybody's cup of tea, right? People may not want to follow me because I talk about, our cute cat, or I've got, I'm a mom and I've got 2 boys. And, maybe for some people that's like too much. And that's okay. Like, I'm not for everybody, And so I think it's a level of showing up, being true to who you are. And I think just, letting people know that, there's a real person behind this. And I think it's that balance of personal and professional. And I really agree with you about Instagram. I think that's one of the reasons I love Instagram. I feel like it's a great hybrid between both.
It is. And thank you for making the point that you just did, because Katie, I've made that point, 1,000 times it feels like, right? Which is the very first thing that I think you have to do is get comfortable with the fact that not everybody's going to like you. And that's okay. You cannot approach social media with this perspective that I want everybody to love me. Like, it's just not going to happen. And the more you put yourself out there, to your point, the more you're going to alienate some people. But that's okay, right? I think Gogo, maybe she was a bit harsh, but she put this well. And she was like, look, if you don't like who this is who I am. And if you don't like me, that's okay, because I probably wouldn't like you either, right? And she wasn't being a jerk about it. It was just, it's just true, right? Like, Brian is a great example. Brian is a very, like, in your face, like, let's do this kind of guy. And that doesn't work for everybody. And it works magic for other people, right? So, you have to accept that that's the case. And the more you accept that, the more I think you can put yourself out there. And by the way, I have to make note of one thing. I'm very hyper aware of the words I used. Using the words authenticity in the context of social media, I realize that that's a bit challenging, right? Because a lot of social media is not authentic. But I think what we're talking about here is making sure that you put your true self out there, and that's okay. Let me go to maybe one last topic here, and there's a couple questions I have in this. So you have this 30-day social media challenge, and I'm curious for you to talk a little bit about what that means. I've talked on this show about committing to things. You can't just dabble, right? If you're going to do YouTube, pick something. I'm going to make a video a week for 6 months and then reevaluate, whatever that is. So can you share a little bit more about what the 30-day social media challenge is?
Yeah, absolutely. We launched this earlier this year, ironically, before all this crazy pandemic happened, and I guess things happen for a reason, right? I tend to believe that, and so we run it a few different times this year, and we'll be continuing it next year. And what we found is really, similar to what you said. It's one thing to try something for a day or two, but to really create something that becomes a habit, you need to do something for, an extended period of time. And so we created this 30-day challenge where basically for 30 days, you get an email from me with a really simple challenge, some sort of simple task that should hopefully take you no more than like 20 or 30 minutes. And some of them are just really tiny little things. But what happens is at the end of those 30 days, you look back and go, wow, like, look what I accomplished. And it's just like anything else. If you want to, be healthier and you join a gym, you can't just like go to the gym once in a blue moon, right? You got to like stick to it. You got to be committed, And so it's just like anything else. And for a lot of folks, honestly, the biggest thing that I see is that people just give up too soon. It gets too hard. It gets too hard. And I had one customer reach out to me, and she was like, "Oh, I don't know if I'm too old for this, and this has just been really challenging." And we started working together a few weeks ago, and I challenged her. I said, "It's supposed to be hard because you're learning something that you've never done before, and that feeling of like a little bit of anxiety and irritation and stress, like you're on the right track. You kind of have to just get through that point to get to where you want to go, Yeah. And I just think that way with so many things that we all deal with, whether it's so many of us with technology. There's so many folks I worked with in the beginning of the pandemic saying, "I don't know how to use Zoom," and now, everyone, we got it.
We got it. We got it down. That's right.
We got it down. So it's just like anything. You got to develop that habit. You got to develop that consistency. And it really goes to everything we talk about. As I said in the beginning, we really believe in having a smart plan. I don't think you need to spend all day on social media. I think you need to have a smart plan. I think you need to do some time blocking and get yourself into some habits that you do on a daily, weekly, and even monthly basis, just like you do with any other part of your business. And it can make a really big difference.
Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely true. Absolutely the case. Katie, is there anything I missed? Is there anything that you want to talk about in the context of all of the stuff, the wide-ranging chat that we've just had, that I missed that you want to cover today?
I mean, I think the big thing for anyone listening is I just would challenge anyone, whether they're at the beginning stages or they're a little bit more advanced, to really think about your plan, and your strategy. And I think when you first start out, you got to develop those habits of, focus 5, of spending a few minutes every day on social media. But especially for someone who's been doing this for a while, I would challenge you to take it to the next level. As we're recording this, we are in the fall of 2020. 2021 is right around the corner. Do you have your 2021 plan done, or are you starting to think about it? We tend to think about it almost like a media company. We put together a 12-month editorial calendar, which can feel a little daunting for a lot of folks, but I just would encourage you to start thinking about your plan for next year. Start to think about what are the questions you get asked all the time. Start to think about perhaps surveying your clients and your prospects, as we talked about earlier, and start to really get that plan in place. Because once you get it in place, then you can really develop that strategy. You get into that rhythm. And then is when the simple little sort of authentic moments come into place, where you're taking a selfie or there's a great picture of your kids. And that part wasn't planned, but it just becomes these little moments throughout your day, and it can become a great layer to everything else you're doing. So think about your plan, think about your strategy.
I agree. I think that's great. Think about your plan, commit to it, and then reevaluate, right? And then you can decide if you need to change platforms or stay the course. But to your point earlier, you have to stay the course, right? This takes a while. And Gia Goodrich has been such a great example for me. 2 years to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, before she had her breakout moment. And so sometimes it just takes time. And like you said, you have to show up. So I think this is great advice. Katie, thank you so much for taking time today out of your busy schedule to do this and to talk with me and to share this message with all of our agents out there.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a great conversation.
Thank you. I hope to have you on again soon.
Absolutely. Would love that.
Thank you. All right. Well, there you have it. Another episode in the books. I think this was really great. I mean, Katie knows what she's talking about. She has so much experience in social media and marketing and branding, and I think it's great. So again, all the links are below. Check her out on Instagram. Check her out on YouTube. Check out her website. She's available to work with, and you can get a bunch of great information there. And get your plans going. She's absolutely right. This is the fall. If you can believe it, October is right around the corner, which means you got to start prepping for next year. We've had a lot of great conversations on this show with people looking at what the market might be like next year. None of us know for sure, of course, but we're in a position where there's record equity in home ownership, and rates are still low. They're likely to still be low. We still have low inventory, so home prices are still likely to be strong, and so that creates a different kind of strategy than if the market were different. So you have to make sure that you're aligned with that, and make sure you pick yourself up, right? This is a weird time right now that we're in, but things are getting better and hopefully going to continue to get better. And so make sure that you plan for that. So that's it for today. Until tomorrow, be safe, be healthy, be happy, get your plans done, and we'll see you soon.